Stephen Puri has been a senior executive at two motion picture studios, DreamWorks and 20th Century Fox. He produced the digital effects for Independence Day, a movie I love. He won the Oscar for visual effects. In addition to his film work, he's founded three startups. He lectures now on the lessons in sustainable high performance that he learned while working alongside some of the world's most productive and creative people. And I know you're thinking, what does this have to do with writing? We're getting to that. Stephen
I'm
is talk
excited to listen. Keep going.
Stephen is talking with me today because he is the founder and CEO of the Suka Company, and that
Mhm.
is spelled Sukha. We will have the link in the show notes. With the mission of helping people find their focus and achieve more, Suka is a flow state website designed to
Oh.
fight distractions. As somebody who's easily distractible, I love this. Welcome, Stephen.
Welcome to the club of easily distractible. I'm the president.
Oh, wow. Okay, good. I'd offer to be secretary or treasurer or something, but that's just too much to keep track of for someone who's
I
distractible.
half the time you'd forget to show up. You're like, was that tonight? Oh,
Yeah.
it's mahjong night. I missed. I'm sorry.
Well, Stephen, we got to start with talking about, I kind of know what a flow state is, but can you elaborate? Can you tell us?
Sure, sure. Let me say this. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Dave. So it is something I've become very impassioned about. And I remember listening to an episode of yours, and I wish I could remember the writer's name, but she said the phrase that broke my heart. She's like, "Yes, I have been working on this novel since like 2019 or something, or 2020." She's like, "I'm doing a lot of research, and then because it's historical fiction, you need to do more research, but it's YA, so you do some research." And it's this whole thing of like, it's right? And one of the things that gets me so much is I'm guilty of this. A number of friends are guilty of this. Maybe you are. Is that it's so easy to go to your grave with the greatness inside you. It is so easy to not walk up the hill and actually plant the flag and say, I did this thing, but instead have one of the many beautiful digital distractions in our life take away our afternoon or evening or morning. And so that's why I talk a lot about flow states, because it was something that helped me a lot. I had had enough days of like procrastinating on returning some annoying email and like, but getting three loads of laundry done, or, like doing some other awful thing, right? You're like, oh, I could have just written, it only took 15 minutes to reply. So this is why I find flow states super interesting. And I think when we're emailing, we're talking about my encounter with flow states. I didn't know what it was at first. When I was like, oh, that was really cool. I was on a flight from Austin, where I live now, to San Francisco. The next day, I was going to meet my team. And I had an idea for a feature I wanted to sort of pitch to them and see if it got some traction, in which case we'd, build it more professionally. And got on the flight. Alaska runs that nonstop route. Captain's like, hey, kids, Wi-Fi's out. See you at SFO. And we took off. I started working, creating my little notes. And like 15 minutes later, we started descending. I thought, oh, there's a problem with the aircraft. We're going to land at DFW. They'll tell us on the ground, like, oh, the hydraulic system, we'll get a new plane for you, right? I looked down and over 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by since I last looked, right? And I had no concept of drink cart going down the aisle, guy next to me talking, like nothing. I just was in this zone, right? And I had prepared myself for run through the hotel lobby, grab a sandwich, finish in my room tonight, pass out, go to the meeting tomorrow. In reality, I had dinner with a friend of mine. And I described this to him. And he said, oh, you were in a flow state. And I was like, tell me more. So now we've set the table. Flow state is an interesting way of getting your brain to focus. And it was named or discovered by this Hungarian American psychologist named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It's about 40 years ago.
Congratulations on pronouncing that.
It took me a while. I figured I owe him the respect to learn how to pronounce his name. So he had an interesting thesis. He said, if you talk to high performers in different disciplines, like writers and scientists and athletes and adventurers, it's curious the way when they talk about the concentrated states where they do the thing that makes them famous, they talk about that state in very similar ways, even though writing is a very different discipline than playing basketball, right? So he was like, what's up with that? Let's find out. And it's sort of like Prometheus wanted to go up, grab some fire, bring it down to the rest of us and be like, hey, here's this thing. At the end of his research and the interviews and all that, he wrote a book. The book is called Flow. It's the seminal work on this. It is why we call it a flow state. And he said the greatest thing. I love this. He said, I chose this word, even though many of the people with whom I spoke have their own phrase about the muses singing, being in the zone, my thought experiments take me away, this sort of thing. He said, I chose flow because we are all on the river, paddling to move ourselves forward. But if we align our boat with the current, it carries us and we go further and faster. And that is what these high performers have figured out how to do and how to do it repeatably. And it is a fascinating book. And he said, here's some of the characteristics, which after that flight on Alaska, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of like what it was. You become immersed in the work, you lose sort of a sense of self and you become part of like whatever you're doing. And you're often operating at your highest level, but faster than you thought possible. Distractions fall away. You don't look at the clock. And when you're done, you can feel a sense of uplift or joy as opposed to depletion. Oh my God, thank God I got that done, right? And it was interesting. I wish someone had told me about this in college. Flat out, those were my first thoughts. I was like, how did no one go, hey, Stephen, I'd like to show you something. It's like taking the blindfold off and saying, oh, is it easier to shoot basketballs now? You're like, it is without the blindfold. Thank you. Why didn't no one tell me I was wearing a blindfold? And so that said, it was interesting to me to then say, okay, all of these people in the intervening 40 years have written about different aspects of this, how to get into a flow state, as well as I see the patterns in great, because, I worked in screenwriting and in film for years. So I've worked alongside many of the screenwriters whose names whose work you've seen on screen, the $1 Million Club. And I see the patterns with them. I'm like, oh, they kind of knew this. Whether they called it a flow state or not, they discovered there's this way of doing the thing you need to do, feeling great when you're done, and actually having an experience where you lose yourself in the work. Like there is no desire to open up Insta or TikTok or your WhatsApp or run my bad ones, run downstairs and grab something to eat, like it's kind of cool. So I've been talking for a long time, and in most pages of dialogue where one character has a monologue, it gets a little boring. So back to you.
Well, this sounds like magic. And at least in the example that you gave us, it just happened naturally. Is there a way that writers and other creatives can make it happen?
It's a very generous question for your audience. And yes, and let me preface everything I'm going to say with really smart people have spent their lives the last like 30, 40 years researching this. So anything I say is not that I'm smart. It's just that we have benefited from someone saying, hey, I'm going to raise my hand. I'd really love to research how sound affects the brain in this state. I'd really love to understand how, these distractions get blocked. So what I share with you is not original, but it is brilliant from other people. Okay, fair? So there are a couple things that seem to really help you get into a flow state. One, generally acknowledged, is sound. And I'll tell you why I say sound as opposed to music, because most people go to, oh yeah, I have a playlist I love to put on and when I write, sort of thing. And like Alex Kurtz and Bob Orsi, with whom I worked, they wrote Transformers 1 and 2, Mission Impossible 3s, or like Star Trek 11, all that stuff. Like they each had very particular playlists that were like, there, get in the mode, we got to deliver this thing, right? And so when you had mentioned Suka, the website we created to help people get into flow, right? It's mainly for writers, designers, engineers, people who sit and need to think and create, right? It's not for marketers or C-suite officers or, salespeople. So one of the first things we did was we said, okay, there's a huge body of work on this sound. Let's use that to create, music in here. Most of the research points to music that is 60 to 90 beats per minute being like the sweet spot, non-vocal. You're not singing along to Blackpink or Britney Spears, wherever your jam is, right? Just saying. Long melodic passages that repeat. There are a number of characteristics of this kind of flow music. Some can be more up tempo, some down tempo, some lo-fi. There are variations on this, obviously, to keep it interesting. So when we created Sukha means happiness, by the way, in Sanskrit. We were like, oh, I have a bunch of friends who are film composers who have a bunch of time on their hands, right? So it was like, hey, here's some specs on this kind of scientifically, researched film music. Could you write like 1,000 hours of original music? No problem. Great. So we launched our little beta version with a lot of original music sorted into playlists. If you're like, I'm in an upbeat mood, listen to Sonic Caffeine. I'm in a down tempo mood, listen to ambient atmosphere, right? And I'll tell you an interesting learning that I had. A buddy of mine, Julian, he's a sound mixer at Lucas Arts, Lucasfilm. He does a lot of the Star Wars games, right? He called me up and he said, hey, I just got back from Nepal. Okay, kind of cool. He said, yeah, it was my son's high school graduation gift. He did really well. I guess got into a good college. Julian was really happy. He's like, what do you want? He's like, I'd like to do it in Nepal with you for a week or two. So he said, one day we're in Kathmandu and it poured rain. It's like one of those rains that just inspires you to create something. He said, I had some of my recording equipment there. So I recorded this lush, warm, beautiful rain in Kathmandu, thinking I'd do something with it. And I got back and I have no idea what to do with it because it's not really going to fit in a Star Wars game. And, he's like, do you want that for that flow state, app that you're working on? I was like, sure, why not? So we quietly inserted into the playlists a playlist called Himalayan Dream Rain. Didn't really announce it, just stuck it there. And it's just 2 hours of rain in Kathmandu. Can I tell you, with no promotion, it became the third most popular playlist we have.
Wow.
Right. That was my reaction. So I happen to run the platform. I know people's email addresses. So I saw people that were listening to it. I emailed them, hey, could I talk to you? I would love to understand why you're choosing rain over this music we paid a lot of money to originally compose and record, right? Tell me more. And I'll tell you, it was fascinating. This is the learning lesson for Stephen here. If you were to reduce down what everyone told me that did reply, it was, oh, rain triggers in me an earlier time in my life when I had to work and it would be raining outside. I was raised by my grandmother in Georgia, and finals time in Georgia was always pouring rain. So it just reminds me of being inside. My family had a lake house when I was little. Like all these things was like rain was this oral trigger of, oh, okay, I'm going to buckle down and get this thing done. And I thought that was fascinating. So, what do you do if you're a crazy founder? You go, oh, well, let's do naturescapes. So I found a stream in Japan someone had recorded. I found the surf in Cyprus, a lake in Emerald Lake up in Canada that apparently has some indigenous bird that's very beautiful. Threw these up there. Can I tell you, like goose egg, like no one cared. It was like the biggest waste of my time. It was rain. Rain was the winner there. And I'm going to tell you, this is the end of this part of the story. The strange coda to the story is, as I'm experimenting by just throwing up there like, hey, surf in Cyprus, I did have one of our members who's a pretty well-known blogger in the UK reach out to me and say, hey, Stephen, I love your platform. We've never spoken before, but I, use it to write. And I had a kid during the pandemic, and I'm known for this cool cafe, coffee shop, kind of like bloggy, life. She's like, I really don't go to coffee shops anymore because I've got like a 2-year-old. So, I'm not like popping the 2-year-old on one hip and writing on my laptop with the other in the cafe as I imagine myself in Paris. She's like, but I do miss being in that coffee shop. Is there any chance you could throw a playlist as just the background sound of a coffee shop? Maureen, I found some guy in Vienna, Austria, who recorded his local coffee shop. Who knew? And threw it up there, asked him if I could use it. And you can listen. We call it Cafe Vienne. It is a coffee shop in Vienna, Austria. You can listen to the little espresso machines doing their little clattering of plates and the murmur of people. And with writers, it's become very popular. It reminds me of when I was in West Hollywood, right across from the Directors Guild on Sunset, like at Sunset in Fairfax. There is a coffee bean and tea leaf that's known as like a writer's clubhouse. You go in there, there are tons of people on their little MacBooks, pounding away. And, there's like the old strange guy in the corner that doesn't really talk to anyone, who's written like $3 million scripts in the past year. And this is his habit from when he was 25, coming to this coffee shop. And, there are people who just got off the bus from Iowa next to you, and they're just figuring out how to write a TV script, TV spec. So I used to go there when I was a development executive at, Fox, Sony, DreamWorks, because it was more fun than just reading scripts at home. You don't have a stack of, books and galleys, treatments for movies, video game things. You'd have to read a ton of stuff. And I would go there and read because the energy of being around that many people creating was infectious. It was really, it felt like you were in a clubhouse. So I understand a little bit like that coffee shop vibe of like it's a thing, especially with writers. Anyway, back to you in the studio.
Well, that's interesting to me though, because you got some, I don't want to say inspiration, you got
Mhm.
the vibe you needed from being around other people. But I
Yeah,
think people generally experience your website as individuals, don't they?
a very true. And one of the lessons I've learned is that there is like the 80% of like people, straight ahead. I want to have my headphones on or whatever, be at home, do this. And there are 20% who get super energized by that sense of like, we're all in this together, that sense of community. I actually, in Suka, one of the last things we launched was a sense of community, like a group chat where you could share things you're working on. You could say you finished your chapter, you could, ask people for inspiration. And I wasn't sure if we should do it. And I asked in the community, I was like, hey, anyone have a feeling on this? Is it a great idea or the worst idea ever? And it was one of our members who said to me this, where it made up my mind. She said, listen, I can go to the Nike store. They will sell me a pair of shoes. I put my left shoe, right shoe, I run, they work great. But there's a reason 100 million people belong to the Nike Run Club because you're more accountable when you're part of something. Like you were talking the other episode about, like a Saturday night writing club versus, other night writing club and things like that. And that sense of like, oh, when you do have other people, the day that you're on the sofa, you don't feel like running, and your friends come by and they're like, oh, come on, do this. Like it feels great to be like, okay, guys, well, do it. And when your friend needs to pick me up and you go by his house and you're like, we're going to do this, it feels even better to be that one who's like pulling everyone up and, raising them up. So we launched it. And it's really one of my favorite things about the little community is you can share what you're working on. You can talk to people.
A lot of writers are like, I have to be nose to the grindstone. I have to do
Mhm.
5,000 words this week. They set
Which
goals for
it's
themselves. They
good to
feel
have
like it's got to
goals.
be a struggle. Uh, isn't that, though, antithetical to being in a flow state?
Writing, creating anything great is a struggle, period. I'm not saying that in between sessions, you dropping into the chat and being like, hey, I just finished a chapter of my book and you want to read it is making it less of a struggle. Like I've seen so many movies. Like really no one sets out to make a bad movie, but most movies are bad. Let's
I
just be
know.
what. And I've worked on some of them. Okay. I was a co-producer on The Watcher, like, you know, but it's just really hard to make something great. It just is. And sometimes it's nice to have company on the journey of doing what it is you want to do. Just so you don't die. Don't die with that book inside you or that screenplay, whatever it is. Like, get it out. It may be bad. You'll rewrite it. You'll write the next one, but get it out.
How
I
often
wish I
do
could
you,
remember her name. What was her name? The one who was
Barb?
like Barb, maybe?
I think it was Barb Nessinger who is working on the young adult novel set in
With like
Tudor England.
Shakespeare and Marlowe and that one, right?
Yep. And it's
Yep,
taken
yeah, yeah,
years,
yeah. I was like,
probably
I
because of
wanted to write to her
distraction.
and be like, just get a draft out and get feedback and
Yeah, she's gonna do it.
yep.
Uh, how do people use the website? What is that like?
Oh, it's the simplest thing. You would ask me about what are different components of getting into flow. Music, sound helps a lot of people. It helps me too. Blocking distractions, like so you don't open up random websites where you're working, you don't pick up your phone. So I basically said I could use 5 apps to help me do this, to track my tasks, give me a timer, another one for my music, another one to block stuff. And what we did with the website is Tony and I just said, you know what? I really am lazy. I just want one big play button in the center of a website in the morning or the beginning of my session. Open the website, I hit play, music begins, my stuff is blocked. I just dive into the zone. I don't want to open 5 things and do all that. And that's really what it is. It's a website where you press play. It'll, if you open up Reddit or YouTube or Facebook while you're working, your little assistant will come out and say, hey, man, is Facebook helping you? And you as the adult get to choose yes or no. It doesn't block you. It just goes like a little friend at study hall going like, are you sure you want to be in Instagram? You're
Ooh.
not going to finish your chapter if you do. you know?
Oh, that's rich. You've got someone, that little voice saying,
Little
you sure you
voice,
want to do
yeah,
that?
pick up your phone. I did. I was working this morning before we were recording, and guilty as charged. I mean, there's a reason I created this. I need help, right? I picked up my phone thinking, oh, I should text Laura, find out what time she's coming home today. And it was in the middle of doing work. And my little voice came out said, I see you on your phone. Is that helping you? And I was like, no, I feel shame. It's not. I should put this down.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm curious now, how long has the Suka website been in existence and how many people have used it? Can you give me an idea
Um,
of the?
Yeah, we've actually got tens of thousands. And like you said, most are very like, one player, like a solo game, right? They just sort of like use it, do their work, leave. And then maybe like 5, 10% are social and drop it in the group chat and share and stuff. It's been around for a while. Matter of fact, Suka, the name, is a weird name, and I acknowledge that, right? I'll tell you, it came about in a kind of funny way. Is that we had an early version of this running with like a working title. And Laura, wifey, whom I mentioned, mother of that 6-month-old that I adore, she and I met in yoga. Daily yoga practice. It's really important for us. We got married while we were working on this working title, flow state out. And where do you go when you do a ton of yoga on your honeymoon? You go to Bali, right? You hang out in Bali and do
Naturally,
yoga on the
yes.
beach, right? Okay. So we're flying to Bali and very grateful that, my career's gone well. I can take off a few weeks and chill out. And I was on a plane and I was complaining to Laura. I said, like Amazon's a cool name. Like it's not called like online bookstore place, like Nike, winged got us a victory. It's not called like athletic shoe company. You know what I mean? It's like these names mean, and every name I've been brainstorming is terrible. It's like flow state app, distraction blocker, like just awful, awful things, right? So she said this. She said, you are going to get 2 weeks with no one from the office bugging you. Maybe your unconscious mind will bubble something up and you're just not thinking about it. Okay, cool. So we got to the hotel in Bali and I thought of what she said. I said, you know what? You may be right. What might seed my unconscious, if you're cool with it, do you mind if I quickly talk, just like 5 or 10 minutes, to a couple of members? And I simply ask them, what's your favorite thing of this thing we're building? Right. And maybe that does something. She's like, I will be going to the pool. I will see you at dinner. So I did. I spoke to 3 people who said yes in the group chat. I was like, who has 5 or 10 minutes to talk to me? Third guy, I was wrapping up. And I tried to be very respectful. I was like, hey, man, it's been 8 minutes. I said 10. I really want to respect your calendar. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you for your answers. What's your favorite feature? Oh, I love the smart assistant. So what? And the guy said to me, Stephen, you asked the wrong questions. And I was like, okay, dude, I don't know that well. I'm intrigued. What's the right question? What should I ask? He said, you should ask me why I pay you. And I was like,
Wait, run that by me again. Why what?
he's like, you should have asked me why I pay you instead of
Okay.
what's your favorite feature. He said, you should have said, why do I pay you? And I said, well, we charge less than $1 a day. Like, I don't collect any money from this. Tony, my partner, we do it for free just because we need it and we like it. And then people start using it and it's grown, right? And I was like, okay, but fair enough. Tell me, please, why do you pay me? He said, the last year, I found I have 2 kinds of days. At 3 o'clock, I'm playing with my kids. They're currently 2 and 4. Or at 6 o'clock, I'm like, where did the day go? And I realized the difference was, did I start your website in the morning when I started work? So I pay you because my kids are not going to be 2 and 4 forever. I was like, you won that round. That is a far, far better answer than anything I was pushing for. So I go to dinner with Laura, right? It's our first night, honeymooning. I'm like, I spoke to this dude who's more articulate than I am. Like I told her what he had said. She's like, yeah, that's really good. Like all your ideas kind of suck, but that's really the core of it. So we go to bed, cute little honeymooners, in our little white spa robes, and our little brushing our little teeth. And she looks at me with a mouthful of toothpaste and she goes, in yoga, we hear all these Sanskrit terms like your prana, your life force, and your karma, and your dharma. That guy you spoke to, he described sukha, that feeling of happiness when you are in your lane doing what you're meant to do. Like you're good at it. You can do it with ease. She's like, you should call your company the Suka Company, because that's really what you're trying to do. Is you're trying to get to those 3 p.m.s where you go, I conquered today, I feel great, not the 6 p.m. of like, oh, I'll get up early tomorrow and try and finish the stuff I didn't do, right? And I looked it up for $14. That website was available, bought
You
it.
are married to a very smart woman, I must say.
You have no idea. I'm one of the luckiest people you'll ever meet.
That is fascinating because it is not a familiar name. Amazon, now it's branded itself, but Suka stands out.
Yeah, and
I
great for SEO, because when someone hears it, we grow. By the way, I don't make any money, so I don't spend money on ads or any of that social media stuff. We grow entirely because someone comes, becomes a member, it actually changes their life, and they tell somebody, and that's really like one-to-one word of mouth is completely how we grow. And it's nice because when someone says Suka, Sukha, we have some SEO, because there aren't a lot of other things called Suka.
It interests me. You also, I mean, obviously, we're aiming this at creatives, at writers
Yeah,
in particular, but you
yeah.
also talk to engineers and they do a lot of problem solving. Do they really have to be in the flow state as well?
They absolutely, same with designers. Our three biggest cohorts are writers, designers, and engineers or developers, because they're all creating. Like, the written word may be what we think of for novelists, authors, bloggers, but keep in mind, like, designers are creating with lines and color, engineers are creating with lines of code that deliver the products that we all use. So yeah, those are fields where they create. And I don't mean creator like YouTube creator, influencer creator. I mean, like, these are professions where someone has to sit there and be deep and go, how do I make this thing where nothing existed before? And that thing may be a paragraph, a sonnet, a logo, a bit of a feature. Yeah.
Let's say I subscribe to the Suka Company website.
Yeah.
How do I have to use it every day for a certain amount of time in order to get the effects we're
Okay.
talking
So
about?
it's actually an interesting question. Let's talk about flow states. What is interesting about the research, and Cal Newport has written some great stuff, and Near and Stephen Kotler with the Flow Research Collective and stuff. So there's a lot of research that says no one has been able to sit down and go, I am now in flow, watch me. It's not like Superman flying. It takes your brain between 17 and 23 minutes to drop in. So you sort of set the conditions where you like focus on something, the music that suits you, and there are outliers. I mean, as much as I tell you, like, we have specific focus music, we all have some friend who listens to show tunes, and it's their way of getting into flow. So no judgment, no judgment. Classical music, 90s gangster rap, whatever works for you. But for most people, it's what we do. So you set the conditions, and then you find yourself in flow. So it is like a muscle. If you do it a few days a week, it becomes like an easy thing to fall into, especially when you're doing things like, hey, I have 22 chapters to write. Each day you're going to write, you say, I'm going to treat this seriously, not as a hobby or a side gig. I'm going to, by June, I want to have this book done. Therefore, every week I must write 3 chapters and edit 3 chapters, right? And you set aside the time. So yes, you need more than 20 minutes to get into flow. Most people who are members, their sessions are 1 to 2 hours. And it's something they block in their calendars. So no one books meetings with them. They're like, hey, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 11. That's when I write my book. Like, I'll be in Suka, like, concentrating. And it's nice because if you do come at the same time of day, you generally see the same people. We call it, by the way, you can laugh. I call the group chat the coffee shop because I love that coffee bean and tea leaf up on Sunset Boulevard. So we call it, it's fun. Just like walk in there, even if you don't talk to that guy in the corner, but you've seen him for a year and you've seen 2 movies he wrote last year, and you still feel like a camaraderie, even though you've never walked up and said, hey, George, I loved your, Avengers movie or whatever. Something you need to do on a routine basis, or it's just like running. Like, you don't run a marathon today and then tomorrow be like, okay, I'm done for the month.
No. It is fascinating that you get to rub
Yeah.
shoulders with so many people who are fairly highly placed in the creative community. And of course, this podcast is heard by a lot of people who are working away at home all by themselves, looking for inspiration, struggling with the kind of distractions that we talked about earlier.
Can I share some thoughts that are not necessarily related to the Suko website, but that I have seen patterns of like really successful, and I mean screenwriters more than anything, but the writers have used. One was pointed out to me when I went to the University of Southern California, which is how I ended up in LA, which is how I fell into film. Okay. So my first job, I was at an ad agency that did trailers and music videos for films, run by these two guys who are in their late 30s, who were known as like the madmen of Hollywood. They're just incredible duo. They could look at a movie and tell you exactly from whom, how to reach them, what worlds they love, where, it was amazing. So my job was we would get a rough cut of a movie in from the studio, a lot of Warner Brothers, Sony, MGM stuff. And I would assign it to a writer producer. I'd be like, oh, you know what? We have this new Will Ferrell comedy for next summer from Sony. Maureen did that great one last summer for Sony. Let me give this to her and you'll take it home and watch it and write a trailer, right? So one of the two principals of the company comes to my office. I'm like 20 years old, right? He comes in, he goes, hey, Stevie, do you know Bart? And I think to myself, like, there's a runner named Bart. I was like, there's a guy in the vault named Bart. I think I've been in the elevator with him. Why? Where are you going with this? He said, you ever given him by the way, he's the only person in my life who's ever called me Stevie, and he does it to this day. He's still a friend, still calls me Stevie. I'm not 20 years old anymore, but Jeff gets away with it, right? So he goes, so Stevie, you ever given him a trailer to write? And I was like, we're talking about the guy that picks up tapes and coffee and delivers them, right? The same guy. No, I haven't given him a movie, a trailer to write, but what? He goes, I got an instinct about him, Stevie. Jeff, you're the boss. Okay. So I pulled a Warner Brothers like B title that had like a month deadline to give to him, because if he comes back next week and he's like, I hate this, I don't want to do this, I just want to deliver tapes, I can give it to, Maureen the pro, who's like, I'll bang it out tonight. Don't worry, Stevie. Right. So 2 days later, Jeff's back in my office. Hey, Stevie, how's Bart doing? I'm like, it's only been 2 nights. I figured I'd ask him on Monday. I don't want to stress him out. Okay, fair enough. What else did you give him? Jeff, he's never written a trailer before in his life. I'm not going to, have him blow his brains out with 2 movies in the same week. He goes, Stevie, let me explain to you how creativity works. It is always about the other thing. So if you give Bart one movie, he's going to stare at that with little beads of sweat coming down his temples. And he's going to write the most obvious B version of that trailer you can imagine. Because the part of your brain that does that weird, I don't know, what do chocolate and peanut butter taste like together? It's not the part that you think you're thinking with. It's like you have to give him something else if you want to give him a chance of having that moment. Can I tell you, in the intervening 20, 30 years, how many times I've seen Jeff proven correct with writers and engineers and designers, creators, people who are creating, full of creativity. It is that weird phenomenon of sometimes you can stare at something until you go blind. And it's not until you look away that your brain goes, oh, here's the cool idea. Here's the weird thing that makes this extraordinary, right? And there's a great book on this, by the way. If anyone is curious how to stimulate their creative mind, there's a great book called The Net and the Butterfly, which is written by Olivia Fox-Caban and Judah Pollock, old friends of mine. And they talk about the way the brain has different networks. There's like a default mode network, which, to be somewhat reductive, it's almost like the baby. It's like the first thing you have where it doesn't know what the world is. It like looks at the cell phones, thinking about it, looks at this bottle of water, things about it. And it's curious. And then later in life, you understand that there is an executive mode network that develops, which is executes action. I need to have the slides deck done by tomorrow's 10 a.m. meeting. I need to do my homework tonight. I've got to pick up the kid. Like, it executes action. What's interesting is it's only when the executive mode network is busy as an adult that the default mode network, almost like a child that's unsupervised, can play. And that's when you get those weird ideas. If you ever notice this, if you have that weird creative idea where you're driving, doing the dishes, showering, walking, like doing something else where you're executing action, and the back of your mind goes, that thing you're thinking about? Here's a cool idea. And you're like, I should write that down. So there's a little creative thought for you, which flies in the face of a lot of productivity, advice, which is monotask. Choose one thing, do only that thing, which is a great way to get your book done. And I'm not downplaying it, but I am saying that sometimes you have to have the respect for I'm going to step away from this computer. I'm going to go for a walk and not think about my book. And that's when you say, oh, I know who killed Christopher Marlowe, you know?
Ooh, focus, not always the good thing. Well,
Yeah,
Steve,
yeah, a lot of different colors to paint with.
we are just about out of time. I've
Yeah,
so enjoyed this conversation. Gonna have to check out the
so much more
Flow
to talk
State
about.
website. People can subscribe to it. Is that right?
Yeah, you can be a member of that for like $20 a month. Mm.
You've given me a lot to think about. I kind of went into a flow state there myself when you were
You're
talking
in the
about
zone.
I totally know.
There's a lot more. Should you ever want to talk more, there's a lot more like fun stuff I've seen screenwriters do that help them get into the zone. And it's just tiny little tricks, but you begin to understand your brain. And when you're at the level of like $1 million a script, it means you're pretty good at it. You figured out how to get the best out of your brain. You know, fools don't make that money.
No, no, I don't make that money either, but it's nice to dream
But I
about.
wish you did.
I know. Well, it's been lovely to talk with you. We'll have all of your information in the show notes. Best of luck to you. And thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. I hope this is helpful. Thank you guys for listening.